You know, we take it for granted that every cell comes from another cell. But if you follow that chain back, you hit a wall. A huge, mind-bending question. Where did the very first cell come from? Did it get here from somewhere else? Or did it just happen right here on the messy, early Earth? Well, in this explainer, we're diving into an absolutely fascinating preprint paper called The Unreasonable Likelihood of Being by Robert G. Endres, and it uses some serious math to get to the heart of this mystery. So let's get into it.
Look, our origin story has been one of our biggest obsessions for, well, forever. You see it in movies like 2001: A Space Odyssey, right? With those big black monoliths nudging our evolution along. And get this, the paper even calls the book of Genesis the mother of all terraforming stories, this epic tale of creation in 6 days. All these stories, they tap into this deep, deep need we have to know where we came from.
But science, it asks a different kind of question. So let's forget about monoliths and divine plans for just a second. What if life wasn't an import? What if it was a totally homegrown thing, a process called abiogenesis, where life somehow, against all odds, sparked into existence from the non-living chemistry of our planet? That is the puzzle we are looking at today.
Okay, but here's where it gets really tricky. Making life isn't just about getting the right chemicals together in some primordial soup. I mean, a cell isn't just a bag of goo. It's this incredibly complex, organized machine. It runs on information. So the real question isn't about chemistry, it's about information. How do you get organized information from a random, chaotic chemical mess? This is where the paper just gets so clever. It borrows a framework from information theory to actually put a number on the problem. Think about it like this. The early Earth was a total mess, right? High entropy, super disorganized. To build a protocell, you have to collapse all that chaos, all that entropy, into this tiny, ordered, low entropy state. And this framework lets us actually calculate that.
So let's do it. Let's get to the math. We're going to break down the two key numbers at the heart of this whole thing. First, how much information do you actually need to build a functioning cell? And second, how fast could you even get that information on the early Earth? All right, first up is the target. The paper calls it iProtocell. And this is not just the genetic code, not just the DNA. We're talking about the whole package, the blueprints for all the genes, the super complex 3D shapes of every single protein, and the intricate dance of all its metabolic pathways. It is the complete instruction manual for a living thing. So how big is that manual? Well, based on these incredibly detailed computer models of the absolute simplest organisms we know of, the estimate is about 1 billion bits of information. Just let that sink in. 1 billion bits. That is a staggering mountain of organized complexity that has to be built from absolute scratch. Now let's look at the other side of the equation, the supply. How fast could the environment actually provide all this information? The paper has this perfect analogy. Imagine you're in a melting library. You're trying to copy information out of all these books, but every single book spontaneously combusts after 1 day. The speed you can gather information depends on how fast you can copy and how fast those books are melting away. So what was the rate? How fast were we copying from those melting books? The estimate, based on what we know about primordial chemistry and how stable molecules are, is about 100 bits per second. And here's the thing that's wild. That's actually really high. It suggests the raw potential, the raw ingredients for complexity were all there. And this leads to this really surprising initial thought. Okay, so you need 1 billion bits. You're getting them at 100 bits per second. And you've got this huge window of time, maybe 500 million years. You run the numbers and it actually seems pretty doable, almost easy even. It looks totally plausible that life could have happened. But there is a massive catch.
Right. That nice, simple calculation makes one giant and, as it turns out, fatal assumption. It assumes that building a cell was a straight line, that every single chemical step was a step forward, always adding useful information with zero setbacks. But what if it wasn't a nice, steady march? What if it was more like a random walk? And this is the hidden flaw in the whole thing. A random walk has steps forward, sure, but it also has steps backward. It has no direction. So if the assembly of life was just a truly random chemical process, it would have been constantly losing the information it just gained, kind of like taking 2 steps back for every 2 steps forward. And you can see on this graph what that does to your timeline. It just blows it up completely. So let's ask the most important question of all. What happens to our timeline if we assume this process was a purely random walk?
No bias, no memory, no force pushing it forward, just pure, dumb luck. The time required explodes. It becomes 10 to the power of 24 years. Now, to put that into perspective for you, the universe itself is only about 13.8 billion years old. This number, 10 to the 24th, isn't just a little bigger. It is 100 trillion times the age of the entire universe. And there's the mathematical punchline. A purely random, undirected origin of life is cosmologically impossible. It just couldn't have happened. And this is what so beautifully illustrates the paper's main finding. The author says it himself right here. Without what he calls immense persistence, some kind of powerful directional memory or bias, the emergence of life just doesn't work. The math flat out says it's implausible on a cosmic scale.
Okay, so if a simple, random process is completely off the table, what are we left with? If the origin of life wasn't just some lucky accident in a chemical soup, then what on earth was it? Well, the paper digs into a few really fascinating possibilities.
So what could give it that non-random push? The paper has a few ideas. Maybe it was something called autocatalytic sets, basically networks of molecules where each one helps build the others, creating this self-reinforcing loop. Or maybe it was a sudden phase transition, like a huge explosive leap in complexity, kind of like when water suddenly freezes into ice. Or, and this is a truly wild thought, maybe there's some physical principle out there we just haven't discovered yet, a fundamental law of nature that actually favors the creation of order. Any of these could have provided that immense persistence the math tells us we need.
And this all brings us back to the profound conclusion of this whole analysis, which is right there in the paper's title, the unreasonable likelihood of being. This math really forces us to take a hard look at our entire origin story. So, if there's one single thing you take away from all this, let it be this. Whatever the mechanism that started life was, it absolutely could not have been a purely random series of chemical accidents. That information barrier is just way too high to climb by chance. The process that created that first cell must have had a powerful, non-random driver, something pushing it relentlessly toward complexity. A random soup just doesn't cut it.